Okay. Joanne and Karen, you guys were here and my computer gave me a blue screen of death and asked me to restart. So here I am, restarted.
Yeah, Sarah said at one point that I was the host.
Yeah,
I'm
it just,
like, well, I don't think so.
I took a picture because it just decided, it just like said I ran into a problem and needed to restart.
Yeah,
So,
I finally just closed out and left and tried to come back in like 3 times and it wouldn't let me in until just now. So,
okay.
um,
Technology.
it's a wonderful thing when it works right.
I was going to say, we always say it's a wonderful thing till it's not.
Right.
So I think I'm going to double check that I'm recording. So all of this is, I guess, documented. Today I'm going to talk about, I call it management mushrooms because really the starting point of this is the woody products that come from managing forests. And then the bulk of today is really actually talking about cultivating mushrooms that grow using woody materials. So I tried to change it up a little today, add a different mushroom species than I usually talk about. So hopefully there'll be some new interesting things. And we'll go from there. So just a quick overview of Women Owning Woodland. This is our program that's being developed to provide learning opportunities to our women landowners and woodland enthusiasts. We do field days, lunch and learns that are all geared towards, again, women woodland owners and also enthusiasts. Facebook page that provides some networking opportunities and anything that's coming up. Again, it's also a great place to come and share questions. So management practices, they create woody debris. So if we harvest timber, if we do forest stand improvement, and sometimes just Mother Nature. So if we have wind events or ice events, this can produce woody debris. And as landowners or you can even, and I always say landowners, but there's also access to woody debris for folks that maybe don't own forest of their own. So on conservation areas, if they do a TSI or they have a timber harvest, they will often issue, it's really a firewood permit, but you can access that also as a place to get woody debris for mushrooms. So just something to think about if you don't have access to, debris from these things because you don't perhaps have timber of your own. So now, we have all that woody material, like what do we do with this? So this is a good chance for us to cultivate some mushrooms. Why we grow mushrooms? So they're a really low investment agroforestry practice. So getting started with mushrooms is pretty reasonable. The most labor is the initial inoculation. And then after that, they're actually a pretty low labor, low maintenance crop to grow. They can also be a high value crop. So right now mushrooms sell for upwards of, anywhere from $8 to $15 per pound. And mushrooms are very nutritious. So in fact, today I'm going to talk about lion's mane mushrooms. These are a species that will grow on logs, and they have been shown to have some benefit towards like memory loss and assisting or, kind of slowing down memory loss in some of our dementia patients. So they do provide those other benefits. So I'm going to talk about 3 species in particular today, but here's a list of mushrooms that grow on logs and that you can actually purchase the inoculant or spawn for this and propagate them on logs that you have. So this includes shiitake, which is probably our most common log grown cultivated mushroom, just because it's used in a lot of cuisines. It grows really easy. And so again, probably the most common, followed by oyster as the second. But the rest of these are also delicious mushrooms that can be grown on logs. That includes lion's mane and comb tooth, reishi, olive oysterling, Namako, and chestnut. And again, these are mushrooms that you can cultivate on logs. If we get into wild mushrooms, there's a lot other species that are also going to be edible and growing on logs. But today we're talking really just about ones that we can cultivate. When we look at this, if we look at our log selection, so if you're, have a TSI that's just gotten done or a timber harvest, this, is kind of that talk about what logs we can use for this. So not all trees make good mushroom logs. As a general rule, hardwoods are the ideal mushroom logs. Pine trees or cedar trees, they are going to be a little bit, they have too much terpene in them. And they are not generally cultivatable with our mushroom species that we use from this. There are some mushrooms that grow on them, but they tend to have a lot higher toxicity towards mushrooms. This is one of the reasons that cedar is great for things like fence posts and other like wood projects, because it decays very slowly. It does not succumb to fungus very easily. And so, but it also makes it a poor log for mushrooms. Different tree species are better for certain mushrooms than others. So some of these are going to do better. And this has to do with chemical makeup of that tree species, the way the fibers are arranged. So this makes it better for different trees, better for different species of mushrooms. So there's and you can find this online. Field and Forest is a mushroom place. They provide this tree species mushroom suitability chart. But here we have our mushroom species on the left-hand side, and then up here is tree species, and then it's organized by whether it is going to move that around, whether you can, if it's great for growing those mushrooms, recommended, satisfactory, or questionable. If there's no, like looking here at lion's mane, like alder, there's nothing there, this means that it won't grow on alder, or perhaps they've not experimented with it growing on alder, so it's not recommended. And so like here, again, shiitake is one of our more common ones. You can see and look across here. So like buckthorn is questionable, but you go over here to oak and it's got a blue star, meaning that it is superior. So that's like the preferred tree species for growing shiitakes on. And so then you can look, today we're going to talk about oysters. And so like they really like to grow on aspen, fox elder, cottonwood, and willow is some of their ideal. But then here's a green square like hackberry and mulberry is recommended. And then the rest of these yellow dots, so quite a few different species of trees that oysters will grow on. It means that it'll work. You might have to try a little bit harder to make them work to grow on there, or you might just not have as much vigor in your mushrooms, but they will work. So like I said, today we're going to talk about oysters. And then we're also going to talk about lion's mane, which is related to comb tooth. So you can do both kind of the same way. And they really like to grow on beech trees, which we don't have a lot of in Missouri. But they also really like hackberry and mulberry, and also those hard maples. They will grow on oak as well. And lion's mane, like I said, we're going to talk just a little bit about cultivating it today. This is actually also a species that you can find growing wild in Missouri. So sometimes they like to grow, they'll usually kind of find their way into trees that are still living, but perhaps have some rot to them, and they'll grow. Like I found quite a few of these in areas where like a branch has fallen off a tree and it's kind of rotted out. And then the lion's mane will kind of grow on top of that. But again, quite a few of those species I talked about growing on logs are also on this list. And some of these are more easily cultivated than others. Mushroom timing. So right now is actually not the best time to cultivate mushrooms. Say we want to wait just a little bit later into spring. So fall cut is usually our best cut. And this is because the wood cells are gonna, are not hardened. And so mushroom spawn can make their way in there. but unfortunately not the best time for us also to, if we want to have mushrooms right away, you can inoculate and leave your mushroom logs outside. It's just going to take a little bit longer for them to incubate and start to have mushrooms. And then winter, early spring, this is a good time. So we're just kind of just past this ideal time. But then right now, so this is, springtime. This is, and you can, and I have a chart that's going to show you, but this is like the worst time to inoculate mushroom logs, simply because the bark on our trees is really loose right now. So I don't know if you've ever like been mowing or weed eating this time of year, and if you accidentally get too close to a tree, the bark just really easily damages this time of year. And this is because there's a lot of moisture flow underneath the bark. And so it makes it looser. So for mushroom cultivation, the longer our bark stays attached to the log, the longer that log is going to last. And so if we cut logs right now and then inoculate them with mushrooms, they're a little bit more prone to losing their bark, which means they're going to dry out faster. You'll probably still have mushrooms on them. You're just going to, again, they're going to break down a little bit faster and have a shorter life. And again, here in this, it talks about like, this is not the best time, but this is also a lot of times where we have storm damaged wood that becomes available because we have windstorms and rainstorms that go across the Midwest this time of year. So if you're trying to salvage some of that wood, again, still doable, just not quite as ideal. But it is a nice time, to be thinking about being outdoors and gardening. And it does give your mushroom spawn a lot of good weather, because we got a lot of moisture coming down right now, which keeps our mushroom logs really moist. And if they're inoculated, that spawn is going to infiltrate that wood a little bit faster. So again, here's kind of a chart about the best and worst times to cultivate logs. And so again, we're kind of in this worst time right now, but we're coming across summer. And then that'll be like anytime from summer kind of into to bud swell. That's going to be a great time to cultivate those logs. And so I actually will do some logs a little bit later in May. So I'm being a little bit thwarted with this weather we're having because our trees are just a little bit behind on their leaf development and coming out of dormancy. So I might have a little bit of bark slippage on the trees or the logs that I inoculate. But the one fortunate thing about inoculating this time of year is that you should be able to see that your logs have become infiltrated by the mycelium by the kind of like the end of the growing season. So if you're going through those basic steps of growing or cultivating mushrooms, you want to choose your substrate. And sometimes you don't choose the growing substrate chooses you because it's something that becomes available because of maybe a windstorm, or it's what's left behind from a forest management practice. And so you can use what you have and then choose your type of mushroom based on this. So again, Missouri is very oak hickory dominated, and shiitake does really great on oak trees. So this is always like a really easy choice if you're looking again for something kind of common and easier to grow. However, there's lots of other choices. And then you'll choose your type of spawn, and we're going to talk about this kind of just basics of inoculation, because type of spawn, it kind of depends upon your commitment. If you want to cultivate mushrooms for multiple years, if it's just something like, oh, I think I want to do it this year and see what happens, different types of spawn are easier for different methods that you choose. And so spawn is the carrier that holds a specific strain of mushroom mycelium in stasis. So it is in kind of a state of dormancy itself. And so we will use myceliated grain, sawdust, and wooden dowels. So the grain or the sawdust or the wooden dowels, this is really just the carrier for the mycelium, and it's usually a small amount of food source. So if you think about shiitakes and oysters, they feed off of wood, and so we will take spores, which then become mycelium, and we will inoculate the grain or the sawdust or the wooden dowels, and then that mycelium will feed on that woody material for a short period of time. Again, it'll kind of stay in that dormancy stage, so it won't eat it too fast, which allows us a little bit of time to get it shipped to us, and then, perfect conditions for us to put it into our log. And so when our goal is that we'll take this spawn, whether it's plugs, pegs, sawdust, grains, and we will put it in a final habitat. And this is where it's going to branch out. It's going to start eating. It's going to colonize that. And that's what's going to ultimately produce a mushroom. And so you can take, there are tabletop mushroom farms, and they'll actually simply take the sawdust, pack it real tight in a bucket or a bag, and that'll be have spawn already on it, and it can actually fruit from that sawdust that's kind of packed in the bag. So it doesn't necessarily have to go into a log, but that spawn is going to be that transfer of the mycelium from kind of a state of dormancy to a place where it can inhabit and produce fruit. Sawdust spawn, this is going to be mycelium that's grown into hardwood sawdust. It is the most common way for us to get fungi that are going to use wood logs, or use other substrates that use cellulose, such as straw or hulls. And so this is, again, you get kind of a bag. It has sawdust in it, but it's also been inoculated with mycelium of those mushrooms. And then this is a really fast way to inoculate a log, because all that tiny sawdust, it has lots of surface area, which is going to allow for the spawn and mycelium to infiltrate your log a little bit faster. And this is usually the preferred method of commercial mushroom growers, because it can be mechanized with some tools. It's also economical if you're going to be doing a lot of logs. So this is actually how I do a lot of my workshops, is with sawdust spawn, simply because it's a little bit more affordable, especially when we do a lot of mushroom logs all at one time. This method can be prone to drying out. So our substrates have to be managed for moisture. So we'll go over the method of how we do this, but we basically drill small holes all around our log, and then we're going to fill those with the sawdust. And so because the sawdust, again, has a lot of surface area, this means that it has the ability to dry out a little bit faster. So we actually will put that sawdust spawn into those holes we drilled, and we will put a wax layer over it. And this is going to help prevent loss of moisture from those holes and from that sawdust, because that's basically the biggest killer of our mushrooms is lack of moisture. So anytime it dries out, this is going to be what kills our mushrooms. Plug spawn is, again, great for use on the log inoculation method. So if we're going to take logs and we're going to introduce mycelium, and this is just a kind of different form of our sawdust spawn. So our plug spawn, it's a wooden dowel, and it has been colonized with mycelium of whatever mushroom you're going to grow. And then instead of having sawdust that gets shoved into those holes, we'll actually simply take those dowels. So you'll still drill holes in your log, and then a hammer, you'll kind of knock that doweling into the log. They already have mycelium on them, so they're going to, the mycelium will start to colonize that log from those wooden dowels that you put in. This is really good for small projects. So if you're not, quite sure that you want to make mushroom logs every year. Maybe it's something that you do every few years because you do like mushrooms, but you're not making a lot of mushroom logs. So this is really good in small quantities. The other thing is that usually we'll still seal these with wax to prevent that plug from drying out. This one's really durable. So it's, if you're doing a fall inoculation in a colder climate where you're going to have a lot of freeze thaw, so this will hold in that hole a lot really well. So it's very durable for that. Also, in some cases, people will do stump inoculation. So if we have a tree that gets cut down and the stump is left, they'll use this because it's kind of easy to get those dowel plugs into the stump. And then also, if you were overseas and ordered this, it's something that travels well. Thimble spawn. So this is kind of like plug spawn, but it's made in a measured amount and it is like self-sealing. So it has either a foam or a wax cap. So it's got your dowel essentially, and then it has a piece of wax or foam already on it. And so this is again one step. And so we still drill holes and then we kind of shove that thimble in there and it already self-seals itself. So there's no need for waxing. So this is again a little bit easier. It's a little more expensive, but if you're going to do mushroom logs just like once every few years, perhaps it's just like, you know, a hobby to see what's going to happen. This is a really good way to do it. It also works in areas that we have low rain amounts because they do not dry out very easily. And so this keeps our mycelium fresh. So there's a couple different ways for inoculating logs. So one is called a drill and fill. And this is an example for a shiitake or an oyster log. So you'll take your log and usually the recommended length is 36 to 40 inches. And this is based off of how long you want your log to last. Also kind of ease of setup, amount of food source for your mushrooms that you're growing. It can be shorter, it can be longer. It's just, this is kind of the ideal length for moving it, stacking it. And so again, can be longer, can be shorter. 3 to 8 inches in diameter. So that's usually our size. A rule of thumb that we have, particularly for shiitakes, I don't know if we have enough data for some of our other species, but for shiitakes, you can usually plan on about a year of mushroom production for every inch of diameter that your log has. And so like if you have a 6-inch log, you can usually expect that mushroom or that log to produce mushrooms for 6 years. I will tell you that I've actually observed some older shiitake logs. So they actually had almost become mulch at the time that I saw them, and they were still producing shiitake mushrooms. So like we had stacks of logs. They've kind of started to break down and lose their bark and almost become kind of a pile of broken down decayed wood. And we still are having, so they were still finding some lignin in there to feed on and produce mushrooms. But again, not the rule. For shiitakes, we can do, this is our diamond pattern. So this is the pattern that we would drill our holes in, and then we would fill this either with any of those 3 other types of inoculants. So we could use sawdust, we could use dowels, we could use thimbles, but this is kind of the pattern. So we can have 6 inches in between, and then a 2-inch distance between lines. And what we do is we strive for this diamond pattern. And this pattern, again, is not you'll have success if you don't follow the diamond pattern, but this is what's been shown to get the most uniform and consistent inoculant. And then of interesting facts, so we really want to put in a lot of spawns so that our shiitakes or oysters or whatever mushroom species we are using. A lot of these cultivated mushrooms are not as hardy as our native mushroom species. And so we want our shiitakes or oysters to establish themselves before any of our native fungus will establish themselves, because they'll outcompete, the natives will outcompete these guys. And so if you're looking for mushrooms to be cultivated, you want to kind of get ahead of that. And so this method, again, introduces spawn consistently around the entire log, which is going to speed up the process of it colonizing and establishing itself. So then again, you're like, this is the same picture, Sarah. It really is actually the same picture. However, so today I told you I was going to talk about lion's mane. And so this is one that it is a slower growing fungus. And so the more inoculant you can use, the faster it's going to establish itself. You can still expect that it'll probably take almost 2 years before you see mushrooms for this one. And so a recommendation is that you kind of double up. And so if you look here and compare it to the previous like shiitake oyster recommendation, instead of 6 inches, we're going to do every 3 to 4 inches, which is going to essentially almost double our amount of an inoculant that we're using or spawn that we're using. This is going to increase surface area, increase colonization, and this will speed up that fruiting process. The third method, or really the second method that's different from our fill and drill, our drill and fill method, is called the totem method. And this is one that's fairly common, particularly with oyster mushrooms, but you can use it on other species. And so this is, in this method, we'll take a trash bag and we will put so there's no drilling on this one, but we'll put a layer of sawdust spawn on the bottom. Then we'll put, this is usually anywhere from 6 to 12 inches of log length. And then we'll put another layer of spawn and then another log. And then oftentimes we'll put another layer of spawn and then we'll put some type of cap over top of this. And that's going to help kind of hold in moisture. And then we're going to seal this all up for a few months. And then, so it's in the dark and in that bag, and we want to make sure there's plenty of moisture in there. And the mycelium that are in this sawdust, they're going to kind of spread themselves through the lengths of those logs. And then after a few months, when we know, because you'll look in and you'll see your mycelium growth, after it's been established, then we actually will open the garbage bag and allow the mushrooms to kind of grow off of that. So again, just a little bit different, but it works really well. So say you have bigger pieces of wood. So for example, like stump pieces, this method works good for them. It's a little bit easier than the drill and fill method because you don't have to manipulate those larger pieces. You also are kind of countering. So with larger logs like this, you have a lot of space on the end. So this leads to a lot of drying. And so this method, we hold a lot of that moisture in really tight while it's establishing itself. And then when we take it out, we'll continue to water it, but it allows that mycelium again to really get established before they're exposed to drying agents. So for today, I was going to talk about oyster varieties and cultivating oysters. And then also I'll talk about lion's mane. And I'm going to finish off talking about wine cap. And I actually put a little bit more information on wine cap today because right now is the best time to be cultivating wine cap. Whereas these others, you might want to wait just another month before working on establishing them. So here's a look. There's lots of oyster varieties that are out there. So this is just the list, and these are ones that you are for purchase. So if you're kind of looking and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many varieties, how would I choose? This gives you a little bit of information. So like different colored oysters. So they come in, white, yellow, Italian, which means they kind of have a scalloped edge to them, gray dove, blue dolphin, a really white variety. So the polar white ones, tend to be pretty popular if you're a commercial mushroom grower, because people really like the cleanness of them. And so again, just kind of different choices and different environments. So if you're, again, thinking about when you want to have mushrooms available, this kind of goes through the fruiting temperatures. So like our polar whites, they're a little bit more of a cool season oyster strain. But up here you can see like summer white and the goldens, they're going to fruit up to a lot higher temperatures. So and again, there's just details about these guys. And then here's usually like the seasonal fruiting that you would expect them. So again, oysters really like elm, basswood, sycamore, and buckeye. These are the most common species that they like that we find in Missouri. They will grow on oak, but it's not necessarily their preferred tree species. They also really like, I won't be able to think of the name of it. It'll come to me here in a second. Box elder. So they also really like box elder, which depending where you are in Missouri or in the Ozarks of Missouri, box elder is fairly common along a lot of our streams. And so again, if you have those trees and take them out, this is again good for that. So again, we grow oyster mushrooms oftentimes using the totem method. And so here's kind of the list of all the things on how to actually grow totem method. So this does use a garbage bag or a large leaf bag. Again, the logs get squarely set on top of the spawn, sprinkle some more on top of that, put another log on top of that, and then we'll cap that. Again, usually newspaper or a brown bag will help secure, again, and this is taking the place of, so if we do like shiitakes and we do the drill and fill method, we'll usually wax the end of the logs to hold moisture in. So this newspaper or brown paper bag is going to take that place and hold that moisture in. We close up that bag and usually store it in a place with a constant temperature between 60 or 80 degrees for 4 to 6 months. Basement is great for storage of this. If you didn't have a climate controlled garage, you might not want to do it there unless it's kind of through the winter months. But if they get too hot, this will cause your mycelium to die. Again, this is the incubation phase. Once that's over, you can remove the logs from the bag and place it upright somewhere in a shady spot outdoors. And then it'll start to fruit on a regular basis, similar to the, again, drill and fill method. Just a quick look at that totem method. Again, this is pretty common for oysters, but oysters can be also cultivated. You can do what we call artificial log method with oysters. So instead of using solid logs, people will use things like plastic buckets. They'll use plastic bags, and they will fill it full of this like sawdust plus the mycelium, and then it will fruit through the bag or through the bucket. Like they'll drill holes and it'll fruit through those areas. So that's called an artificial log method, which is also effective. But, you know, I really talk about what you can do with things that come from the woods. And so we stick with a lot of the natural log method. So, and then just to look at a couple different varieties of mushroom or oyster mushrooms. Blue Dove is the one I've actually had the most success with so far. I picked a few more varieties this year to try out with inoculation. So I'll let you know how that goes. I also, interestingly enough, and I should have thrown a picture in this slide or in this presentation. So we often talk about how our mushrooms don't compete, like shiitakes don't compete really well with native mushrooms. I will say that I right now have probably 6 or 8 logs that they kind of got stacked in the woods and a little bit overgrown. And they right now have native turkey tail mushrooms on them, but they are also growing shiitakes. So I don't know how long the shiitakes will stay with the other fungus that's there. But it's the first time that I've actually seen both my shiitakes and a native fungi utilizing the same logs. So again, might be that my shiitakes are kind of stuck to their little spots and then the turkey tails are using the rest. But I do have both on the same logs right now. Okay, my other species I'm going to talk about today was lion's mane, Hericium erinaceus. There's another species also called comb tooth, which has a similar appearance to lion's mane. These guys don't look like your typical mushrooms. So they are kind of a large white fungus that has kind of like hairs growing off of it. I have a picture on the next slide. But these guys, again, we have them as a native species, but you can also grow them through cultivation. And they can be cultivated on natural logs, very similar to our shiitake. So you can use the drill and fill method for these guys. They are slower growing and less aggressive. So that's why we double up that inoculation rate. So if you looked at that picture I showed you, instead of every 6 inches, we'll do every 3 to 4, because this will speed up that colonization process and lead to them fruiting a little bit faster. It's still not unusual to cultivate these guys and not have any fruits for the first year or two as you wait for it to establish itself. Lion's mane does really great on beech, sugar maple, and ironwood. But you can use other softer hardwoods such as tulip poplar, aspen, sweet gum, or our soft maples. So this would be things like silver maple is one of our softer maples. So lion's mane would do well on that. I have seen, I'm not sure about the success on cultivated, but I've actually found lion's mane growing on oaks in the wild, if you will. I'm not sure how the cultivation method goes. They might just be one of those ones that's like, you have okay success with it. But again, kind of just interesting. Here's what the mushroom looks like. So again, very unusual mushroom or fungus. And so this one, again, you're like, well, how do I eat that? That doesn't look like any mushroom that I eat. So this whole piece right here would be harvested and it would leave mycelium underneath. And then the most common preparation method I've seen for this is they'll slice it and then usually saute it in butter. So again, it's kind of an interesting or more unique mushroom. So, and then my last cultivated mushroom today, I was going to talk about our wine caps, and mostly because this is a great time of year to start wine caps. So they are a white stalked mushroom with a port wine colored cap. They're a fairly attractive mushroom, kind of a more traditional looking mushroom. They have, if you're wondering, like, I've never had this type of mushroom, they have kind of a nutty, it's not too much of a, like shiitakes have kind of a very distinct flavor. Wine caps have more just kind of a nutty flavor to them. They do great in being used for like sauteing with other vegetables, grilling them. They are quite large, so you can sometimes use them in place of a portobello. They also are good for building soil, suppressing weeds, and you can kind of cultivate these guys in your landscape. And these guys, they don't grow as well. They don't do logs. They actually really like to grow on wood mulch. You can also grow them on straw, but I've had a lot of luck with putting them in woody mulch kind of underneath my other flower beds. And so it's kind of just a multiple use, and it's been a really good addition of organic material to those garden beds. And a good, again, just kind of an easy mushroom to grow. This is what they look like. So again, just a nice, dark red, purple, maroon colored cap, and then a white top. So, and this is one, it is, so I'm not sure if anybody else battles this, but in my own yard, I battle Wandering Charlie, which is a invasive species that was used as a ground cover, and it takes over. But my mushrooms still actually did pretty well, given that they had that Wandering Charlie all around. So again, these guys do great on wood chips, and they are kind of perennial on wood chips. So you can usually expect about 2 years before having to kind of re-inoculate. On mine, I've been trying to add sawdust on a regular basis, like with the hope that they'll kind of keep re-inoculating themselves. So we'll see how long it lasts. But they do like partial shade. So I have mine all growing under, if anyone's ever grown rose mallow, it's very tall, large leafed plant that's native to Missouri. And so it provides a lot of shade for my wine caps underneath. So you can do like, again, this one you buy like sawdust spawn, you put your hardwood chips out, put a layer of spawn, and then usually like another layer of wood chips on top of that. And this, again, it works great in mulched beds. So, or asparagus rows or blueberry beds. Anywhere that you kind of use wood mulch on is a great place to grow wine caps. You can also cultivate them on straw. However, this is usually just a single year's worth of growing. But if you take a bale of wheat straw, soak that in water for several days, and then spread that out and sprinkle the spawn between layers of that straw, then it'll grow there. Again, just a little bit about, they're usually ready for fruit, typically 2 to 11 months after planting. So if you throw out your spawn now, especially while you're out mulching beds, you can expect usually by July that you will have wine caps. And then you can, again, pick them when they're kind of in a button form, or wait a day or two, and that cap will kind of open up and they'll become a little bit flatter. And then these guys store just like regular mushrooms. Once you've established them, so they usually break down your mulch pretty quickly. So again, straw beds usually only fruit for a year before they're broken down. Wood chip beds might fruit up for 3 years, but you'll see fewer mushrooms over time. I try to leave, so I don't pick every single wine cap because, to be honest, last year I produced so many wine caps that I ran out of people to give them to, and we didn't eat them all. And so I'm hoping that by leaving some of those wine caps in there, that it will help kind of respawn it. But I have freshened up the mulch. And again, for this endeavor, I really like to use like fresh mulch, or that comes from there's a sawmill that's kind of close to Rolla, and they'll give you or sell you mulch. It's not been treated with anything. And so again, that just makes me feel better about, because mushrooms do pull from their environment. And so you probably want fewer chemicals in your mulch that you're going to grow wine caps in. So again, just some considerations for growing them, but it's again another different type of waste product. You can also make your own, if you had a timber sale or TSI or a tree that fell, and you have chipped those branches up, that would make great bedding for growing wine caps. If you're looking for more information, here's some of the resources that are out there. There's several places to buy mushroom spawn and supplies from, but Field and Forest is one that has a lot of information. In addition to, they do sell mushroom products, but they also have a lot of learning opportunities on their website. And then the rest are kind of a couple different blog spots and different places to look for information. So I talked for a long time today. Our glitch made for a little bit of a late start. Are there any questions for me today?
Well, thanks for the resources, Sarah.
Yes, Karen, you look like you're outside enjoying nature.
I am.
Say, this is also, I don't talk much about foraging for mushrooms, but right now we're in morel season, and which also kind of, I just think signals the start of some of our other outdoor foraging. So
yeah, I left last week, I guess on Thursday. I'm like north of Interstate 70
Okay.
and went to Illinois. And I knew it's like the day I left on Thursday, my daughter-in-law posted that she finally found morels. And I was going to a mushroom festival down in Southern Illinois, which was kind of cool. And then right now I'm in the Ozarks, so I may miss out on morel season. I don't know, but
yeah. Well, I've not found any this year.
Well, I have a bunch in my freezer, and she's been finding them. And then she found a bunch in her front yard. She's about a mile down the road from me. Has 3 catalpa trees that have been there for decades.
Okay.
And this year, whether they ever had morels before, we don't know. I mean, probably, if they did, they got mowed down.
Yes.
But she was out there, she was getting ready to mow, and she just happened to see one, and then they were everywhere. And I'm like, go figure.
Nice.
But, I got a mushroom growing kit for Christmas a number of years ago. And like there's some jars of stuff. There were no spores with it. You had to order the spores still.
Okay.
There were some jars that are filled with stuff. There's a tote, there's like a light, there's a heat thing. It's almost kind of like having an aquarium.
Okay.
And I never did anything with it because every time I went online to the few places that I heard about, I could get all kinds of, psychoactive mushroom spores, but, I wanted, chicken of the woods or lion's mane or, just the normal edible mushrooms. And every time I tried to do that, they were always out of stock.
Okay.
So I have never used this thing. I've never done anything with it.
Okay.
And I've, been through a couple of your presentations on doing the logs, but
yeah.
So maybe those resources you put up there will give me some other options. And
yeah, hopefully so, because there's definitely, and it's become a little bit more popular. A couple of years ago, I think I tell people a story all the time. I was Williams Sonoma was selling actually like tabletop logs that you could grow mushrooms on, so it's kind of a little bit more popular hobby these days.
I had one that came in the mail one day, and when I looked up the place where it came from, they sold for like 20 or 25 bucks. And I'm like, I know I didn't order this, so I don't really know why I got it. And I think it was shiitake, I believe. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, it was like this big clump thing, and you had like a it was almost like one of those plastic cone-shaped deals that they put on like, floral arrangements.
Okay.
To protect them, and you put that over the top and you kept it moist and whatever. And the thing had all kinds of little buds on it. I got like one big, huge mushroom out of it.
Yeah, see, some of those are harder to keep because they run out of nutrients pretty fast.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of it looked like it was going to do something at some point and never did. But the one big mushroom I got was, really quite tasty and wonderful. And I think there was a couple of smaller ones.
Okay.
But, I finally was just like, okay, I don't know. The thing's starting to look really funky now. So
yes.
I don't know if I didn't have it in the right place. I didn't have enough light. I have no idea.
Yeah.
See, the thing just shows up in the mail, and I'm just like, I have no idea why I have this, but
yes, but it's worth a shot, right?
Yeah. And I've never tried any since. Like I said, I've been to a couple of year presentations, and I've had, a couple others from other places, and I'm like, I love a lion's mane, all the wild mushrooms, and I'm always out hunting them down. But
yeah,
I guess it, would be kind of nice if you could grow them. So
you save a little bit easier searching.
Or, have a steady supply and not have to depend on, like, because I haven't had lion's mane for a few years.
Okay. Yeah, they're pretty few and far between in the woods, it seems.
Yep. And I haven't run across chicken in the woods for a long time either, but
Okay, that one seems to be more common, but still hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually a good segue because we had a question about winter hands-on events. So I'll be doing some hands-on events starting usually late summer and then into the fall. So we'll do some actual log inoculation events around the state.
good.
So yes.
That's what I need to do. I need to actually just go to one, and they were going to do a wine cap deal on last Sunday at the mushroom festival.
Yeah.
They didn't get the pre-registration thing figured out. I mean, this is like the second time they've done this event.
Okay.
So they didn't get the pre-registration thing figured out, so it was like, but yet they were wanting to limit it. And so they kind of were going to shift to something else. But there was like a major storm coming in on Sunday night, and I was going to have a 6-hour drive after. And the wind took my tent down on Saturday afternoon. And I'm just like, you know what? I think I'm gonna get done with the rest of Saturday there. And then I just spurted out and made my drive. And so I missed out on the whatever it was they were going to do in place of the wine cap.
Okay. Very good. Oh, Joanne, you're finding morels good. And then Anne asked about morels, like in particular trees. So Karen just shared catalpa trees. I've always heard elm trees,
Right.
particularly elm trees that are dead or declining. So morels they do eat woody material, but they're not going to grow on the trees. But they're usually feeding on like dead root material that's in the soil.
So we have a lot of elm, and then I tend to find them under the the thorny honey locust.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's because they're probably actually because there's elm trees around. So I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe I find them under the honey locust more because things leave them alone. I don't know. But yeah, that was a new one on this catalpa. And I haven't had a chance to, dig into that and research. Like, I don't know. And that's the only trees that's out there on that edge of the yard. And that's the only ones that have been there for.
I was going to say, and usually if they can just find some dead root material, that's what they're going to enjoy.
Yeah. Well, so. and they're very old trees. And I mean, I don't, I'm sure they're on their decline of,
Yes. Yeah. And even healthy trees, they'll have some dieback in the root system. And
right.
Yep. And then who else? Oh,
we've always talked about these people that like live in Springfield, Missouri and places. And, oh yeah, I got morels growing in my yard, or they're in the big next door. And it's like, I got to trek like, a half hour to get to the woods, and unless I drive and park and, be out there all day and, miles of hiking, and y'all are just like walking out in vacant lots. I mean, but I wouldn't give up living in my country and the farm anyway. So I guess that's the price I pay. I just have to hike more. But
then Carolyn said she found morels while picking up trash, which is kind of par for the course, just like Karen said. We look in the ideal places and don't find them, and look in the less ideal places, and there they are. And then a question about growing inside. So you can grow mushrooms inside pretty successfully. So mushrooms are fungus, so they don't do any photosynthesis. So you can grow them pretty successfully in a basement or somewhere that's going to stay on the cooler side. And yeah, it can be pretty successful. And Ian mentioned having way too many wing domes. They might be places for morels to grow. All right, I think I hit all the questions today, and it's just about 1 o'clock. I will have next month's Lunch and Learns up here pretty shortly. If you have anything you'd like to see, feel free to email me if there's anything you're looking for in particular for for May, or kind of as we go into the beginning of summer, feel free to shoot those ideas my way. You're all on the email list, so I'll send out the registration for the next month for sure. All right, have a great rest of the week.